Hey guys, welcome back to another video lesson for your last week of the school year, 2019-2020. You guys have done an awesome job keeping up with everything, and I thought I would finish out the school year with some review on some of the things that we talked about prior. So this lesson is going to be on the Explorers. Remember, we did the Explorers in, I think it was in January, and we did projects on them. So I just wanted to review some of the big ones, and you'll have an assessment to complete this last week. And then I think we're going to do another video lesson this week as well. I'm just not sure what it's on yet. So let's go ahead and start talking about the Explorers again. So the Explorers were during an age or a time period called the Age of Exploration. It was a time period from the early 15th century to the early 17th century. So you're talking early 1400s to the late early 1600s, so a couple hundred years. However, people like Marco Polo, who we talked about, he was in China, in the late 1200s, early 1300s. So the official Age of Exploration, those are those dates, but there were people outside those dates as well. And what were they doing? What were they looking for? Well, they were looking to discover new lands and new people to primarily do trade with, right? They had commodities and goods that they wanted to sell and exchange. So they found people to do that. In order to get to some of these places, they had to find new routes. And by this time, they were going around Africa into where, the Indian Ocean and the West Indies, and into those lands and into China. And there were trade routes that were developing. And so people were getting in on this. So by the time, Columbus had sailed the New World, the Europeans had made it around Horn of Africa. And like I said, Marco Polo had already made it to China. And you can see on this map, it all really originated from Europe, right? It was the Europeans who, you're talking about, things were starting, scientific technology was getting better, shipbuilding was getting better. They were able to travel further and longer. And you can see these blue dots, coming around and into these areas here, where there's a lot of spices and things like that were exist in this part of the world that weren't over here in Europe, and so they wanted them. So they built these big ships, and they traveled around, and it took months, sometimes years, to get back. These are the blue dots. The yellow dots, these were when they were participating, unfortunately, in the slave trade here of West Africa. And you can see the yellow dots, yellow lines were into the Caribbean. Of course, this area here wasn't discovered until really basically 1492. And this guy up here, these were the Vikings, Leif Erikson and folks. They were the first to discover North America, but we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So these were the first real routes, these around Africa. And that's a long journey, okay? And Columbus was one of the guys who was going to try to buck that trend, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. So let's first talk about Marco Polo. So Marco Polo, he was born in the middle of the 13th century, so 1254 in Venice, Italy, which we've talked about Venice a lot with regard to other things like the plague. It was a big hotspot for the bubonic plague. And Venice was, like I said, Venice was a big port, a big city. A lot of trading happened there. And he traveled to China mostly via land. He went that way, overland from 1271 to 1295. So 24 years of his life was spent traveling to China. Those are my dogs again. So he spent 17 of those years, though, in China at the court of their leader, Kublai Khan, and he was an envoy, and he would do missions for them as well in that area. Like I said, he went to China via land, which was a long way. Some of the things that he did do, he thought he found the unicorn when he saw these different animals, and it was actually like a rhinoceros, but he had mistaken it for the fabled unicorn. He did bring back the idea of paper money and different vegetables and foods, and possibly eyeglasses. There's debate on that, but that's one of the things he may have done. In all of his story that he wrote, a lot of it was while he was imprisoned. So, again, a very polarizing figure. The game Marco Polo, which did originate from him, from some sort of story that they were looking for him, and they would call him, and he would answer it with his last name, and then it evolved from there. But that is true. Miss Mel looked that up for us. I think maybe she remembers. It's really one of the first explorers, Marco Polo. You can see here the gray line, right, and it's going to China from Venice. Venice is up here. He travels all the way over here, and the red is him on the way back. Okay, returns to Venice 1295. So it's a long way to go. It's a lot of land to cover. And then, nope, this is him over here on the right. Christopher Columbus, our friend, old Chris. Despite popular belief, he was not the first person to discover North America. That discovery was attributed to a Viking named Leif Erikson. He actually had traveled to the northern part of Canada, their Newfoundland area, and he was the first person to actually land on North America. First European, I should say. Columbus, he thought he knew that he could travel west across the Atlantic and go around the globe to the West Indies there, where they were already going around the Africa to go. So he thought it'd be faster if he just went that way west and boom, find India and be able to trade that way. So that was his idea. He was looking for a new route, and he made 4 voyages. The first of which was in 1492. The famous little rhyme there. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He was not the greatest leader. He ended up being a governor of one of the islands that he had found. I believe it might have been Hispaniola. There's a lot of controversy around Columbus, but he did do a great many things. And when he did die, he died thinking that he found a new route to India. He died thinking he found the West Indies instead of finding really the Caribbean and then in North America. Both 2 cities claim that they have his bones. I think it's there's a place in Spain, and there's a maybe in an island in the Caribbean also claims to have his body as well. So he's still controversial up to this day, and no matter what you may hear about him, he did do a lot for exploration. This is him on the right here, old Chris, and these are his voyages that he made from Lisbon, Portugal, right off the little part of this over here. And you can see the blue is the first voyage. So he went down and around and back. The second is in red, the third is in green, and the fourth is in yellow. All basically to the same area there, except over here in yellow, he made a little bit further over here to Central America, what is now Central America. But typically he just stayed in the Caribbean. Okay, old Chris Columbus. Sir Francis Drake, my personal favorite. He was born in Devonshire, England, around 1540. The exact date of his birth is unknown due to records. Unfortunately, he learned how to sail very early in life, and he got on to some ships that did deal with the slave trade early in his career. So he would transport slaves from West India into the Caribbean. And a lot of people, when you look up Sir Francis Drake, the first thing that's going to pop up there is that he was a pirate. Now, he's not a pirate in the traditional sense of what you're thinking with eye patches and hats and parrots and peg legs and all that. But, to the Spanish, he was a pirate because he destroyed their ships, he destroyed their towns, he wreaked havoc in the Caribbean because of he was English and they were at war with the Spanish, so that was what he was. So to England, he's a patriot, right? He's a good guy, and to the Spanish, not so much. He was the first Englishman to sail across the world, around the world, so that's called circumnavigation. And he did so from 1577 to 1580. And they really call this the Queen's secret voyage because they really weren't sure what he was doing there. But he did get around the world, and while on his way, he wreaked havoc on the Spanish again because they weren't expecting him to be there on the other side of the United States, which was now the United States. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth when he got back on his ship, the Golden Hind, and he helped defeat the Spanish Armada, which is another word for navy. And he died off the coast of Panama, and his coffin was thrown overboard. And it was done. It was laid down, and he was put in his armor and in his all that, so he would sink to the bottom, so his enemies could never find his body. And he still has not been found. There's been some efforts here recently to find him, but it's not been successful yet. So pretty interesting. And this is him here on the right, saucy-looking fellow there. And this was his route. So he sailed from Plymouth down here, coast of West Africa. He went across down to South America, all the way down the coast. He stopped here for the winter before moving on through the Straits of Magellan. That name should also be familiar to you. And he rounded the Cape Horn, up here and over here to North America, and then back all the way across here. He gets stuck in some low water due to the weight of his ship, so they had to throw a lot of it overboard so he could continue on his voyage, and then back to England. 3 years it took. Long time to be on a ship. 3 years. Speaking of Magellan and the Straits of Magellan, Ferdinand Magellan was a Spanish explorer born in 1480, and he's credited with the first actual circumnavigation or voyage that went around the world. His voyage took place a lot earlier than Drake's, from 1519 to 1522. However, I take issue with this because he never made it all the way around. He died. He made it all the way to the Philippines, where they fought a local tribe there, and he was wounded in battle. And one of his commanders took over and finished the journey. His expedition started with 270 men and 5 ships, and through the course of 3 years, they lost 4 of those ships, and almost more than 200 guys. So it was a very expensive journey in the cost of ships and lives, but it was a journey around the world nonetheless. Here's a map of his journey. So the dark red is Magellan. So you see he took the same, Drake took the same route that Magellan did, except Magellan went straight across the Pacific, where Drake went north, looking for something called the Northwest Passage. And then you can see here, dark red stops right here. This is where he had passed away. And then a gentleman with the last name of Elcano in the light orange finished the journey. Okay. Still credited with the first circumnavigation of the world. You can make up your own opinion who you think was the first. Another gentleman, Spanish, by the name of Juan Ponce de Leon. He's a Spanish explorer, born in 1474. He explored mainly in the Caribbean area as well. 1508, he's named the governor of Puerto Rico, and eventually, a couple years later, he was actually replaced by Christopher Columbus's son, strangely enough. He was also the first person to lead an expedition to Florida, modern-day Florida, and there's a lot of stories that say he was looking for the fabled Fountain of Youth. That was the myth. That was the story. Modern historians don't believe that. They don't think that there's any merit to that because there's not really a whole lot of, writings and things of that nature to back that up. So they think it's a myth, but it sounds fun. And there is a place there in Florida where you can go that is called the Fountain of Youth, and you can see where he supposedly went and found this fountain. he tried to set up the first settlement in North America, in Florida. However, the local tribe there fought him back fiercely, and he was wounded in battle. And he passed away, I believe, in Cuba, but he is actually buried in Puerto Rico. And if you're ever in that area, you can actually go see his tomb, which would be pretty cool to see somebody that famous. So that's the last of these guys. And I know we talked a lot about other people. We talked about Sir Walter Raleigh. He was in prison a lot. He was looking for El Dorado, right, the city of gold. But one thing they all had in common was they were always trying to find new places and trade with new goods and new people. And, you know, by doing so, they found new lands and they introduced Europeans to different areas. And if it wasn't for them, you know, who knows what would have happened, you know, later on down the road. So hope you enjoyed the video. Jump over on your email and do the assessment that's attached. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, all right? I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.